Praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever. Today is the 100th episode of these Gospel Nuggets. Probably all over the known world, street parties will be taking place and other civic celebrations, perhaps firework displays this evening. All joking aside, I wanted to just say a few words, as it were, unscripted today for this 100th nugget. As you remember, 100 weeks ago, we were beginning the pandemic, beginning the lockdown, and I wanted to record these little messages each week as a kind of a thank you to everyone who supports us at Nazarene, who has been supporting us as well during these 2 years when it's been very difficult. And thanks be to God, some people, I know there's a little old lady in Idaho who enjoys this, so at least one person is enjoying them. But also thank you to all those who've kept us going, as it were, and kept us being able to support our brethren who are suffering in the persecuted church. It's been a blessing. And 100 weeks ago, yes, we were entering a rather grim time, and now 100 weeks later, we're in a rather different kind of grim time. And so we need that gospel message. There are two things really I wanted to say, and they're both connected with a book. I sometimes recommend a book, and I'm recommending another book, Paul, by Tom Wright. He's also known as N.T. Wright. He was an Anglican bishop, but also a great biblical scholar. It's a heavy book. I mean, it's a good doorstopper, but also it's heavy. But one really learns some insights about St. Paul. As you know, he's a great hero of mine, and especially having been to Damascus 2 years ago. There are two things as we head into this new time of anxiety. For example, we are all going to suffer in some way. There's no pretending, there's no way of sugarcoating it. We're all going to have to tighten our belts in some ways, but not in the ways that so many are going to suffer. And we must keep, of course, the people of Ukraine in our prayers very especially. But, for example, the book says that when a prophecy was revealed to the early Christian church that a famine was going to hit the whole world, Wright says in the book that we would all, and perhaps I myself included, are thinking of it already, we'd start to store things up ourselves, start to worry more about ourselves. And he said a great feature of the early church, which is what they did, was they didn't think of themselves, they thought of the Christian family. And they took a collection to help the parts of the Christian church that would be suffering more than them. This isn't an appeal for money at all, but, for example, the problem with grain is going to hit our brethren in Lebanon, in Syria, in other parts of the world especially. Lebanon gets 60% of its grain from the Ukraine and from Russia. Syria, I'm sure it's going to be worse. This suffering is going to be immense for our brethren. So when we're tempted, of course, and naturally to take care of ourselves, tighten our own belts, as Christians, we also must remember that we must support our brothers and sisters, and I'm sure you will do that. The second thing, and I apologize, of course, for my 100th episode, I have a heavy cold, but the second thing this book really helped me with is St. Paul's vision of hope. We need hope at this time. I've spoken about hope before, but we remember hope is not optimism. Things are probably going to get worse. Things are probably going to get quite bad. We Christians are people of hope. Hope is a virtue. A virtue has to be exercised. A virtue has to be trained. Wright uses the example of learning the violin, but anything in terms of athletics or any other thing that we want to do well has to be trained. Hope is not a feeling. Hope is a belief. Hope is based on faith, a virtue, a theological virtue that God will see us through. It's the entire message of the Old Testament, that God is faithful to his people. He doesn't answer our every need every time we ask him, but he is faithful. It's an act of faith in God. It's an act of trust. I'm reminded of the, perhaps some people might think a little trite, a little easy expression of the great saint Padre Pio. Padre Pio always used to say, pray, hope, and don't worry. Now, as I said, that can sound a little trite, a little easy, but of course it's not at all. It's a massive act of faith. Pray. We must deepen our prayer. If we want to have more faith, we must pray more. Hope. the theological virtue, the exercise of hope in dark times that God will see us through. And don't worry. Yes, naturally we worry, but also we must have confidence in God. If we pray and if we hope, God will see us through even the darkest of times. So on this 100th episode, once more, I thank you. I thank you for your support. I thank you for your prayers. I ask you to continue to pray, obviously for me and my ministry, but also, most importantly, for our persecuted brethren who are suffering and will suffer more in these tough times. So once more I ask God's blessing on you with the very words of St. Paul himself. Brethren, rejoice, be perfected, be comforted, be of the same mind, be at peace, and the God of peace and love will be with you.